Greetings my watch wanderers and welcome to another One Chapter at a Time. Now I have been inundated with a comment from the viewer asking about the last 3 cheap quartz watch review videos. Alfie asks, what's it all about? Well, today I make good on the promise to experiment with the series of quartz watches that I have just reviewed. You may recall the Scummy, the Geneva, the Big Bird and the Shinobi One Kenobi. I bought all these watches from AliExpress for a couple of reasons. 1, I'm a massive time, and 2, I have a very specific experiment in mind for them. Let me take you on a little journey. I've always been fascinated with technological improvements on design. This is the way forward. Think of the Foliot escapement, to the pendulum, to the balance wheel, steel springs, to silicon springs. While I don't particularly think a quartz watch is a step forward in horological greatness, it was a massive technological jump. I do own several quartz watches, but I like those for very different reasons. These bargain basement beauties were bought with another objective. One such brand who drew my interest is Ressence, but what caught my eye was how it looked when displaying the time. The system it uses to tell the time was like a set of planetary gears rotating like a solar system around each other. The crystal is a deep convex covering what looks like half the watch. The hands and numbers seem to be projected to the very edge of the glass. How did they do this? It's a thing of beauty and a worthy winner of the Grand Prix d'Horlogerie. The technical innovations kept coming with Ressence. It has integrated bellows to compensate for temperature variations. It has a magnetic transmission. But it is the display that seems to be projected onto the glass, as if there is no glass. This watch is filled with oil. Not quite black gold, but a clear, refined silicon oil. This took me a moment to process. They filled the inside of the watch with oil, and that's how they achieved such a beguiling display. When you look at the dial of any watch, you see the refraction of light as it moves from the air inside the watch to the crystal. The light bends, deforming how you see the face of the watch. Ressence filled their watch with a clear oil that changed how the light is refracted as it moves through the space. The other added benefit of filling your exclusive timepiece with Texas tea is the improved water resistance. Now that the watch case is full of a substance that's difficult to compress, it can withstand the pressures of diving in the ocean. People have done experiments sending their most basic Casio watch filled with their finest Crisco and attaching it to the drill of an oil platform. This plastic $20 watch then survived the immense pressures of thousands of feet under the ocean. This also interested me. I like swimming in the ocean. I like snorkeling as much as the next person. I like a dive watch. Okay, let's be realistic here. The Ressence Type 3 filled with magical physics juice on the second-hand market is worth somewhere between 40,000 and 50,000 of your finest Aussie gold coins. The Zen Hydro is a much more achievable 2,000 to 3,000 Wally Hoppers. Don't get me wrong, these two watches are worth every penny of the price they command. These guys are at the top of the food chain. It's just a shame that my aspirations don't quite match my remunerations, which begged the question, can I get the essence of a Ressence for under $50? The interwebs is awash with people filling their watches full of oil to see this effect, and I want a part of this action. There are many PSAs of people giving advice saying, don't fill your watch full of oil, it will ruin your watch. Make sure the watch is waterproof first, else oil will spill out and ruin your clothes. Really? How badly can this go wrong?
12 seconds later.
Enter the protagonists. The Scummy. This watch was purchased because of its clear silver dial and deep dish chapter ring. Allegedly, it has a waterproof to 30 metres, which equates to a real-world water rating of a humid day. We will be testing that in the crucible of hydrostatic testing. The Geneva. This is just the cheapest watch ever. Even I am surprised at just how cheap and nasty this thing is. It's not waterproof, it's not easy to read, but can we improve it? Next up is the Big Bird. Again, not waterproof, but it is the display that I'm interested to see how it reacts to the oil treatment. With such a clear display, I wonder if it will have the same two-dimensional effect as the Zen Hydro. And lastly, the Shinobi, or the Shinobi 1 Kenobi. This guy has an interesting face and a multi-layered dial design that will be interesting to see how it is affected. Again, the two-dimensional properties of adding oil to the watch may have an interesting result on the colours. The bubbling crude that I will be using is this Type 200 silicon oil, and this has a viscosity of 50 CST, or kinematic viscosity in centistokes. Think of water as having a viscosity of 1 centistoke. The label says that this oil is not suitable for food, cosmetic, medical or pharmaceutical use. And as you can see, it's crystal clear. As I have a predisposition of making a mess, I'm going to substitute my fancy Bergeron microfiber cloth with a pair of jeans, which smell faintly of petrol. And straight into it. Here we are, just removing the watch strap from our Scummy watch. This is the small container that I thought I'd have a go at using. So the first thing I'm going to do, of course, is remove the case back. Let's have a look if we can take out the stem with the crown, put that safely aside. Now this is my first go at it, so who knows. I reckon I am just going to, straight in there, fill the thing full of oil. Let's see what happens. Bit of a shake, bit of a left-right, and when in doubt, add more oil. I'm trying to apply the case back. First thing I noticed was the case back tries to float. Now I don't actually know if there is a massive air bubble in the back of it or what, but it was trying to float a bit. What was surprising was how difficult it was to position the case back onto the case to get it to fit. And the next thing that was surprising, that shouldn't be surprising, was trying to add the crown. This is the slipperiest thing in the universe. But I do manage to get the case back in place, and I take it out of the oil bath there and just try to squish down the case back, but it didn't really work. So take two. I remove the movement with the movement holder. Once they're separated, I then put it back into my container of oil. I add the movement with the dial and the hands into the case, and as you can see, I am struggling. Just this small container is too small for me to really get in there and, fit the crown and the stem. So I find a slightly larger container where I can get a better angle to try to fit the stem. So here I am struggling to fit the stem again, but I managed to get it in the end. Obviously, I've used a lot more silicone oil to fill up this container, and the whole movement and case is completely submerged. So once again, I try to fit that case back in, and the thing just will not get into place, but I do eventually get there, and I just press it down with my fingers for the time being just to see how it looks. And at first glance, yeah, it does seem to work. As you can see here, there is a slight air bubble in there, which is annoying, but it's not the end of the world. What you can see is how the light reacts to the case full of oil, especially when you compare that to a watch without oil in it. Alright, moving swiftly on to our cheapest watch in all of history. Remove the case back and once again take out the stem with the crown using a little push lever there, and then remove the movement holder. When I get the case into the oil and make sure that that is squared away. Then I apply the movement and the dial, and then the dial ring. The dial ring proved to be surprisingly difficult to install. Once again, that tried to float, but I got there in the end. I found that by moving around and just applying the stem slightly helped to put everything into alignment. Between the tweezers and my small piece of pegwood there, I eventually was able to get everything into alignment where I could insert the stem back into the movement. But it is so slippery, it was sliding all over the place. So I get the case back into the oil solution, and as you can see, I tipped the container up a bit onto an angle, and this made sure that I tried to get all the air bubbles out. Once again, just using my fingers to press it closed for the time being, just so that I can take it out, give it a little wipe down. But to really close the case, I put it in my little case closing tool. Now the first thing I noticed is the watch has stopped, so this is desperately disappointing. But it's not the end of the world. But playing with the watch, I can see that the oil is leaking out of it like nobody's business, just by putting some gentle pressure on the case back and the glass. Oil is seeping out all over the place. And you could see there that a third of the oil had seeped out so quickly. Next up is the Big Bird. Now I quite like the old Big Bird. Get the strap off quite vigorously there, which is exciting. And once again, I will get the case back off the Big Bird. There it goes. Very similar looking movement and movement holder to all the other watches. Just removing the stem and crown there, and remove the movement and holder from the case back. There it goes. Bring over my swimming pool of oil and put in the case, and a bit more oil for good measure. Next up is to apply our movement into the case. Let's just see how this goes, and I put it in at a bit of an angle in the hope that any air bubbles would sort of slide out. The case ring sort of came off at this stage. That's okay. And as you can see, I just keep trying to move the movement and the dial around ever so slightly, just to make sure there aren't any air bubbles. Applying the case ring again with my piece of pegwood and trying to get things lined up, proving to be more difficult than first blush. using the stem to try to line things up, I eventually get it to the point where the stem and the stem tube and the movement holder are all in alignment. Eventually, after many goes. Many goes. The Big Bird does have a gasket on the case back, so it's interesting to see how this performs. Getting the case back into position is just as difficult as every other movement, but I get there eventually. And using my fingers, I flail around trying to get the watch out of the oil. As you can see, it is surprisingly difficult. Putting it into my little case closer here, just to make sure that the case back is firmly applied. And I think this watch looks great. I mean, I loved this watch beforehand, and I think it's very interesting now. As you can see, I do have an air bubble in there, which is pretty annoying, but, you know, this is my first go. She'll be right. Let's just see how it performs. I'll put the watch strap back on, and let's see how it goes. I'll set it aside, set the time, and just see what happens. Next up. Alright, this watch is slightly larger, but we'll go through the same process where I just remove the watch strap and get into the case back. There it goes. Very nice and easy, this one. Once again, the movement and the movement holder are all very similar. This watch also has a small gasket on the case back. Getting the movement out was no problems. Adding a bit more of this silicone oil just for good measure. And then drop in the movement. Let's see what happens. This one went in really easily. It just slotted straight back in. Giving it a few taps and a bit of a wiggle just to make sure there are no air bubbles. That hasn't proven to be particularly successful, but you know, it's all part of the process. It's just a bit of fun. With this bigger plastic container, I do have a bit more room to maneuver the stem back into the case. The old plastic container was a bit too small. Here is our case back, and let's see if we can get this roughly into alignment. There is a small cutout in the case back that allows for the stem, so you do have to line that up. Once again, you can see me tipping the plastic container just so as that I try to avoid any air bubbles. And eventually I get the case back roughly into position. And let's see if we can close the case back with our little tool here. By this stage, everything I touch is covered in silicone oil. Just about everything I own now is covered in silicone oil. And a bit of a gentle squeeze, and the case back is firmly pressed into place. It seems to set okay. I must admit, with the silicone oil, the setting is a lot smoother. It's very smooth in there. But let's see what happens. As you can see, it is a beautiful sunny day outside, with the light streaming in. And here is our lineup of watches. Now I'm still covered in silicone oil, so everything I touch is slowly being covered in yet another fine layer of silicone oil, but that's okay. So here we have 4 watches that have survived the process. Big Bird appears to be working just fine. There is a small bubble in there, which is annoying, but okay. The Shinobi certainly made the dial look a lot flat. There is a tiny air bubble in there, but not bad. However, doesn't seem to be ticking. We'll leave that for a minute, see what happens. The Geneva. While it is now only half filled with oil, just over half, much like my engine, it too has stopped. Which is a shame, because the oil did do a lot of good things. It really made the colours pop, and it makes it so much easier to read. And the Scummy is a bit of a surprise. Yes, there is an air bubble in there, which is kind of annoying. I might try and address that. But it does look good. It makes the colours pop. It really makes it shine. And it still seems to be working. Earlier, I mentioned that the Ressence watch has a patented bellows system built into their watch. This allows for the contraction and expansion of the oil as it heats up on the wearer's arm. This is where I think I will come unstuck. To make mechanical bellows that operate inside a watch case based on temperature is yet another genius design innovation by Ressence. Well, there we have it. 5 quartz watches now filled with oil. So what's the verdict? Should everyone go out and raid their pantry for their finest olive oil and fill up a quartz watch that Grandma gave them? The answer is clearly no. However, I do think it is worth the experiment. The effect it has is difficult to capture on camera, but it's really cool. To answer my question, can you get the essence of a Ressence for under $50? The answer is a definite maybe. Nothing quite lives up to that amazing case design and the unique way of displaying the time. I do think manufacturers can learn something from this. Unusual case designs, textures, finishes, different ways of displaying the time, these are all valid. But the result of this Exxon Val disaster is very interesting and pleasing to look at. Thanks for watching. If you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing and leave a comment below. Ciao for now.
Do that.
We'll make a good chance.
Is that it?
We'll do it a couple more times. But yeah, exactly like that. Thanks. Thanks.